You are darker than usual, but
I don't know how to explain that.
Could be a tan.
The fact that the computer dropped was not good. All right, let's start. Here we go. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Brachas, Perek Hey, Halacha Beis. In the Ois V'Hadr's edition, we are learning Daf Nun Vav. We are in Daf Nun Vav Amid Aleph, 4 lines from the top of the Amid. And we left off learning about what happens if one omits She'ela, the request for rain in Birchas Hashanim in Barech Aleinu during the winter. So we learned that you can still make it up by saying it in Shemei Tefillah. Now, the Gemara is going to open up today with a question: what happens if a person omits it from Shemei Tefillah? Either maybe you have to go back to the beginning of Shemona Esrei, and even if you don't have to go back to the beginning, if you can simply go back, do you have to go back to Baruch Aleinu? Or since we said that if you missed it in Baruch Aleinu, you can say it in Shema Koilenu, go back to Shema Koilenu, as we'll see inside more pratim of this question. The Gemara is going to say something very important, that when a Yachid davens the bracha of Shemei Tefillah and Dafke the Yachid, Shemei Tefillah is not a bracha that is considered to even have a matbeya, Shetavo Chachamim, a formula that the Chachamim formulated. When a bracha has a formula, one is never allowed to change it. But as we are learning that there are many things that you can chaparain in Shemei Tefillah, we will view it as from the outset, Shemei Tefillah is that bracha of the Shemona Esrei that has no formula, that you daven for whatever you need. And because of that klal, because of that concept, we will see a halachic consequence. On Daf Nun Vav Amid Beis, we're going to go back to the Mishnah, in which we had a 3-way machloikes tanoim. We had the Tanakama, that we will call the Chachamim. They hold, and indeed so we paskin, that when Havdalah is added into the Shemona Esrei, it's added in the bracha of Choinen Hadas. It doesn't take up a bracha for itself, it's put in Choinen Hadas. Rabbi Akiva holds that Havdalah is bracha, Revi is b'fnei atzma. That means after Hakel HaKadosh, there was just a bracha of Havdalah, and then you go to Choinen Hadas. And Rabbi Eliezer, I'm just going to say it now, that when we learned the Mishnah in the Shinu Nuschais, there is one version that holds that it's not Rabbi Eliezer, it's Rabbi Yoshua. But anyways, that's not the way we have it over here. It's going to get confusing. So let's go. Chachamim in Choinen Hadas, Rabbi Akiva, bracha b'fnei atzmai. Rabbi Eliezer says you add it in the Hoida'ah. The way we add today Alanisim, means in the bracha of Moedim. That was what we had in the Mishnah. The Gemara is going to go through an unbelievable evolution of how Havdalah should be said, predicated on a bomb question. How can there be a machlekes word to say Havdalah? Havdalah is something that we say every Motzei Shabbos, every Motzei Yontif. Why didn't you just do what you were told by your father what to do? Do what your father did. I know this kasha you can ask on the tefillin, how can there be 4 types of tefillin? I know that. But the Gemara is going to ask that question, how was there even a doubt where to put Havdalah? And actually, what we will see, we have some of it in the Bavli. We're going to read a Rashirilio that brings a shtickle of the Bavli, but how it began. In other words, we make Havdalah twice. We make it both in Shemona Esrei. We also make it holding a cup of wine. We're going to see if there is one that's the Ikid, one that's the Tafel. We're going to have a 3-way machlekes amoyroim, which is really fascinating. B'negeya, again, the evolution of Havdalah. And even the Shitas Chachamim, which we paskin, that we say Havdalah in Choinen Hadas, we're going to learn a machlokes. We're in the Choinen Hadas, as we will see inside. Without any further ado, Chavra Daf Nun Vav Amid Aleph, 4 lines from the top of the Amid, right? Behemshech, that if you forget asking for rain in Barech Aleinu, you make it up. You ask for rain in Shema Koilenu. Now the question will be, what happens if you forgot mentioning it by Shema Koilenu? Now I know everyone is going to say, okay, where are you right now? The Gemara is going to address it in the answer. Where are you right now? And that will be a big nafkamina. Did you finish the Shemona Esrei? Did you not finish the Shemona Esrei? But you skipped Shema Koilenu. So now the Gemara is asking, Eichon in the Babli would be Matahei. That's why Shloime mixes the Hey and the Aleph. Only Yerushalmis do that. You see from here, Eichon hu Chayzer. To where do you go back? Aleph. In other words, maybe you have to go back to the beginning. And even if you don't have to go back to the beginning, there's it's like a 3-step question. Maybe you have to only go back to Shema Koilenu, or you missed Shema Koilenu. Now go back properly, go back to Baruch Aleinu. So the Gemara says that this will be Kidda Amar, right? Kiddamar Rabbi Shimon Barva in the name of Rabbi Yechon. That what? That the Rosh Chodesh, that you're supposed to add Yalav Yavoy, and we say it in Ritzei. What happens, my friends, if you forgot to say Yalav Yavoy? So there is an afkamina as to when did you remember? That is what you have to add to answer the question. And indeed, B'Shem Rabbi Yechanan, Im Akares Raglo, if you took the 3 steps back, we bow and we take 3 steps back, then you have to go back to the beginning of the Shemona Esrei. But if you didn't yet conclude the Shemona Esrei by being oike raglo, by uprooting your feet, by taking the bow and the 3 steps back, then you don't have to go back to the beginning. So in other words, first of all, you have to go back. You want to know whether you have to go back to the beginning? That will be like Rabbi Yechon. If you finish the Shemona Esrei and you did not ask for rain during the winter season, you have to go back to the beginning. If you were not oike raglov, you don't have to go back to the beginning. But now the question is, to where do you have to go back? So for that, im akares raglov chayzel lachatchila. But the im lav, now we have different girsa'os. I'm going to read the girsa that we have in the Charedim, which is chayzer la'avoida, meaning just like Rabbi Yechanan says, you go back to where you should have said it. Now, my friends, I know that you're supposed to ask for rain in Baruch Aleinu. We know that, but we learned at the end of last year that if I skipped it, I forgot, then I have to say it in Shemei Tefillah. Now that I skipped it, now its place became in Shemei Tefillah. If I went further to Shemei Tefillah, if I don't have to go back to the beginning because I didn't take the 3 steps back, I only have to go back to Shemei Tefillah. In other words, choizer la'avoida for yalav yavai, applying it here would mean that bishoymeya, that's how we with the base, bishoymeya tefillah. And look inside the Charedim, 4 lines from the top. Chein kosav Rabbeinu Haigon, olodvarav eskimu harashba, over there in the Babli, the Perek Tfilas HaShachar, the Haran B'Reish Tainis, the Koyach Yerushalmi Zeh, which is something that is not the most common. In other words, we are paskening like this Yerushalmi. They all these 3 big, the Gon and 2 Rishonim. Now, says the Gemara, let's remember, my friends, that there's, first of all, there's a big nafkamina, Benegeya, that ask for rain, that Chazal tell us that once the month of Nisan is gone in Eretz Yisrael, rain, it's called Yatza Nisan, Yeshamin Simen Klolo. That is the way it is in the Holy Land. Out of Eretz Yisrael, Lamashal in Bavel, and the case here will be Ninveh, Mosul. There, we don't say that rain is a Siman Klala. And now, based on just that little intro, says the Gemara, Ben Ninveh, it was a time that Tzrichain Me'ebatainis Basar Pischa, that there was a time that there was a drought, and they needed, and they made a tainus in order for there to be rain after Pesach. Now, just to add something very important, you'll break your head, you'll come to the same conclusion. After Pesach doesn't mean after Pesach, it means after Nisan. That's very consequential, because this, that in Eretz Yisrael, the rain is a siman klala, it's a curse. That's after the whole month of Nisan. So that's what it means over here. So they went to Asoim and Shailum, L'Rebbe, whether they can make such a fast day. Look inside the Charedim. Also, Shailum L'Rebbe, whether Misanin Oiloi. Now, they were in Ninveh, But why were they doubting? Because since we learned in the first chapter of Tainus brings the Charedim, Yotza Nisan Kshamim is Simin Klala. So maybe Atka Dekach to make a fast, they didn't know. How aligned do we have to be with the Holy Land, or other? You have to focus on what you need right here. So Amaloin Rebbe, the guys, Rebbe wasn't at Yisrael. We know that they asked the Shiloh over there. They got insulted, but so be it. A chassid asks his Rebbe, Amaloin Rebbe, L'chu vasu, Koidem called, you're not an Eretz Yisrael. You are an Ninveh. You go make a fast. Aberu bilvad, shaloi tishanu mitvia shel tefillah. Wow. In other words, you can make a fast day. But asking for rain in Barei Cholenu, even though they were in Ninveh, and it's not a Simon Klo, when do we stop asking for rain? And that's interesting. That's everywhere. When do we stop? The first day of Pesach. So that was a Gavaldik thing. So a fast they make, but don't change the tefillah. The davening, everyone is davening the same tefillah. When in the other direction, the beginning of the asking of rain, we're not all on the same page. We all make the haskara on the same time, which is on Shmini Atzeres. But when do we begin Hashgacha Pratis? Neretz Yisrael, Zayin Mar Cheshvan. Chutz La'aretz, 60 days from the Tkufa of fall, which is this week. It's going to be, I think, tomorrow night. We begin asking the Saint Talamat Labracha. But in the other way around, that was the Rebbe's Psag then. Don't ask in Barei Cholenu for rain, even though you are justified in making a tiny sibur. So now the question is, they're making a fast day, but they're not going to daven in the Shemona Esrei for rain. They're fasting for rain. So again, with the Aleph, where should they say that? The Charedim writes around 70 lines from the top. Is al the main tainus is not just to fast for rain; it's to ask for rain in the tefillah. The tzorech sheisha. And now that Rabbeinu Hakadosh says, you don't separate yourself from everyone else. Only the same beracha. So where should you say it? So Rabbi Yirmiyah thought, you know what? Rebbe says, don't be mishana mitviyah shel tefillah. Don't change the formulation of the prayer. So here the Charedim writes, Deloy mikre mishane matbeya. What's a change of formula? Only when you mention it the B'rechas Hashanah. Because ein maskirin oisa elavim oisak shamim. Masha'enken in Shemei Tefillah, like we mentioned, in Shemei Tefillah, it's not called Mishana Matbeya. Now, so says Rabbi Yirmiyah. So Amalei Rabbi Yosi, Oy Kein Amar Rab Ze'eda B'Shem Rab Chuna, that what? That Im L'Shor B'Birchas Hashanim. This is what we just finished learning. And the truth is not only She'ela, but if you forgot to mention Buddhism B'Tchias HaMeisim, you say it B'Shemei Tefillah. So isn't the ask of rain in Shemei Tefillah considered to be part of the Matbeya? And again, Rebbe says, don't be Mishana Matbeya. Umar loin Rebbe, didn't Rebbe just says, Umar loin Rebbe, B'chuvasu, Ubavatu L'shana B'Tfiyah. So the fact that everyone can make it up in Shemei Tefillah, does that not mean that it is part of the formulation of Shemei Tefillah? So answers the Gemara.
Question, Rabbi. We got a second.
But
what is considered changing the formula? We keep saying
it means that we have to stay faithful to the words of Chazal.
Not adding anything to the order or inside. Not adding anything. Is that what you mean?
Not changing, and part of that would be asking for rain when there is no. If Rabbi says that in Baruch Aleinu during the summer, even in Ninveh, you're not allowed to ask for rain, and if you do so, you're Mashana Matbeya. So why wouldn't that be in Shemei Tefillah? Since if you skip, you're saying Shemei Tefillah, so isn't that Mashana Matbeya? That's what it is. I'm sorry. So Amalei Rabbi Yosi is an answer. So Amalei Rabbi Yosi, you're wrong. The fact that you can say it in Shemei Tefillah, one second. Hey, okay, good. I'm saying good. Okay, how can you say it over there? Are you? That's called a change, and they disagreed with that. And therefore, according to Rabbi Yosi, where should you do it? So they were making a fast day, and the Iker fast day is to ask during davening. So al date de Rabbi Yosi heichenu aimra. So for that answers the Gemara, I'll tell you, you forgot the whole Masechta Tainis, that whenever they made a communal fast day, they would add 6 brachas in the Shemona Esrei, 6 between Goyel, Yisrael, and Refaim. And the final of those 6 is a bracha that ends with the words Hamarachim al ha'aretz, Hamarachim al ha'aretz. So in those, there you add those 6. In those 6, you ask for rain. V'sheish shuhu moisei. So asks the Gemara, At Kedoin, the answer of Rabbi Yossi fits, would work, is when you have a tzibur, by the tzibur, by a tiny tzibur, the shliach tzibur adds the 6. But what about a yachid? She'en loy sheish binayin. So here the Gemara answers, Amar Rabbi Chanina, that loy chein, Amar Rabbi Ze'eda b'shem Rabbi Chuna, that yachid can be shoyel tzerachav whatever he needs b'shemei atfilah. In other words, look inside the first charedim, the first wide line under the Gemara, that when a yachid daven shemei tefillah, it's not a bracha with the formulation. The fact that everyone gets to add whatever he or she wants during shemei tefillah means the Chazal, they wrote the Shemona Esrei, they left one bracha unformulated. It's not called that you're meshana madbeya. Loy kein hilkach yachid, loy mikra meshana mimadbeya. The Talmud shoyel kol tzedach v'shemei tefillah. Now, when the shliach tzibur is repeating shemei tefillah, that there is a matbeya there, and that's why the only solution, according to Rabbi Yossi, is that whenever you're making a fast day for rain in summer outside Eretz Yisrael, then you have to only add rain in the 6 added brachas that the shliach tzibur adds on every public fast day. But a yachid, l'kula alma, gets to add whatever he or she wants during Shemer Tefillah.
Rabbi, when you add something in Shemer Tefillah, do you have to say v'sein talemot, or you can just say it in your language, however you want?
So we said, Shlomo, not written over here, that the only rule is not to change languages when you're talking to the Eibishter. So if you're davening in Yiddish, then you ask in Yiddish. If you're davening in Lashon HaKodesh, as many of us do, ask in Lashon HaKodesh. You can make up your own words. Rebbeinu shaloylam anu tzarichem geshem achshav. Gesund to hate. Or you can say that they were smarter than us. They were more inspired. Say the same talamat levracha. They know exactly what they're saying. Stick to your language. Okay. Now, moving on to Havdalah. And this is mamish fascinating. The evolution of Havdalah, or like ask your kids, why do we make Havdalah both in the davening and ala kois? I know you can ask the same question on Kiddush, but now we're learning about Havdalah. Okay, so let's begin. Havdalah b'chein and Havdalah. Chachamim say that. Tanakama, but we call this the Chachamim because we pass on like the Chachamim. Rabbi Akiva, and just again, Lohoid guys, that in Yerushalmi, Rabbi Akiva spelled with the Hey at the end. And in the Babli, Rabbi Akiva spelled with an Aleph. It was a Rishon called the Or Zarua. He wrote a sefer called the Or Zarua. It's a very important halachic sefer. And the Or Zarua wrote in his Akdama that why did he name his sefer Or Zarua Latzarek Or Zarua? Because he was suffering with Rabbi Akiva. And he was a dayan. That means he needed to write a get. And he needed to write the word Akiva. And you have to know how to write the words, and he didn't know how to spell it. And he was bothered and bothered and bothered. And until he came, he doesn't know, he asked the Oibishter called a Shailas Chala. However, this is done. You leave a parchment, you put it under your pillow, it's a blank parchment. And he woke up in the morning, and what did he see on the parchment? Oir Zarua Latzadik Uli Yishrei Leiv Simcha, Soifa Tevis, Reb Akiva. You'll see. Oir Zaresh, Zarua, Ayin. Go Oir Zarua Latzadik. And that's Taka Kishitas Yerushalmi that Rabbi Akiva should be with a hey. But just to know that we don't pass him that way. But he was so inspired that God gave him that answer that he called the sefer Or Zarua. But coming back over, so we have Chachamim, Rabbi Akiva, and 2 Girsais. We're going to go with Rabbi Eliezer that you say it in Horidon. So let's begin. And again, this is a bomb question, and you can ask this on many other practices in Yiddishkeit. Like we have a machlekes. Do we put the mezuzah slanted, which is the way Ashkenazim do it, or do we put it straight? How is there a machlekes? I mean, anything that's it's practicing Yiddishkeit, and I do it, and I did it yesterday, and my father did it, and his father did it. How can there be a machlekes where to do it? Like Havdalah is an obligation. L'Rambam midoiraisa. And even if not like the Rambam, we're doing Havdalah since the times of Moshe Rabbeinu. Like, you have a question where to do it? We're saying that the Yaakov Avinu daven might have everyone daven. We're davening forever. Shimon Barva asked in front of Rabbi Yechanan that davar shu noyag ba, noyag are constantly doing what is Chachamim Cholken Olav. How is it even possible for there to be a machlokes? Or read inside the Charedim at the end of the Amid, bit me up that hey nishkach hadavar. How can we have forgotten? So in order for there to be the possibility of a machlokes heichon yaskin avdolah, v'haloi behold v'chol matzei Shabbos mavdilin kol Yisrael. Why didn't you just do what your father did? Oh, by the way, by tefillin, clearly from the times of Moshe Rabbeinu there was a machlokes. The fact that we attribute one to Rashi, one to Rabbeinu Tam is which side did they say is the ikir? It was from the beginning. There was a Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam and Sheravid and Shimoshe Rabbah. It has to be that way because no one ever stopped putting on tefillin. However, Havdalah is different, and as we're going to see, and let's begin. So says the Gemara, Omar Loi. Rabbi Yechanan responded. Listen to his words. We're going to have three opinions here. Opinion number one: Al Yidei Sheikara Bakois. Really. The Ikir Havdalah is to recite it over a cup of wine. Shechachua batfila, so they were able to forget where to say it in davening. Meaning, now this is something that a sheet that we have in the Bavli. Instead of opening up a Bavli, look inside the Rashirilio, the top, the beginning, and he Pashat quotes the words of the Gemara in Bavli. The Gemara Dilan, in the Gemara. Brachas Daf Lamed Gimel. This is the way it said. Guys, listen to the words. Really, even though Rabbi Yechanan says the ikir is bakois, he says like this: Batchila kavua batfila. When is batchila? Even though I mentioned that the Ov is daven Shemona Esrei, we're going to go back to our Gemara that Ezra HaSofer, right? The Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, they made the Shemona Esrei, and when they made the Shemona Esrei, when they made the Matbeya, they put in their Havdalah when it's needed. V'hainu Ezra Anshe Knesset Hagdolah. Now, what happened? Meaning, the Rabbi Yechanan says ikir is bakois. You have to make it over a cup of wine. So why is he says like this? No. Ikir is on wine. We know that. Aber what happened is that we even were poor. When we went up Bisman Ezra in the beginning of the times of the Bayesheni, we were after Golos, then we were moving again from Persia back to Israel. People had no money. You know, the Beis Hamikdash, the second Beis Hamikdash was built with the Persian money. The Gemara says that. And they put a big Shushan Abira sky, what's it called? They made a plate that had the skyline of Shushan Abira in front of the Beis Hamikdash. That was the plaque that they should know, they should get covered for. So he's saying like this, that when we became impoverished, we couldn't afford wine. So Ezra says, you know what? Say it in the daven. And then, since the ikir, that's the words of Rabbi, the ikir was said by Kois. We only said in the davening because we had no geld. And therefore, I'm reading right in the Rashirilio that Eshidu, when we got wealthy again, Bisman Bayesheni Vikavu ala Kois. And once we went back to making Havdalah over a cup of wine, they said, since really it was only to be said over a cup, Ezra made a substitution. You can't afford wine. Okay, let's put it in the davening. When we could afford wine, we took it out of the davening. For how many years? For hundreds of years. During that time, so what changed? Churban Bayesheni. Again, Jews don't have money. Now we're going in the times of our Mishnah, right? The first or second generation after the Churban. That's the Mishnah. Chachamim, you have Rabbi Akiva, and you have Rabbi Eliezer, or even if it's Rabbi Yeshua, that was the beginning of Golos. So Chazru ve'he'anu, when they became poor, and v'nispazru, we became dispersed. V'lo lahem yishu, we weren't even gathered in one place. And he's saying, when was the Churban Beis Hamikdash? In the years of Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkanis. So now we decided, just like we learned from Ezra, that when the Yidden didn't have enough money to buy wine for Havdalah ala Kois, you can substitute it by saying it on the Tefillah. So now they said we can go on their shoulders. But now we forgot when they did it. That's a Gavaldic answer. You know why we forgot? Because for hundreds of years, we did not say it in the Shemona Esrei. Why did we not say it in the Shemona Esrei? Let's go back to the words of Rabbi Yechanan. Because she ikara bakois. And therefore we forgot where to say it in davening. And even though we went back to it, and nowadays we do both, but it's shaykh for you to forget. Now the Gemara is doing something, you have to get used to Yerushalmi. The words milsei amra means to sum it all up. Because we're going to have really three opinions, and the Gemara is going to want to make it clear what is everyone saying. What Rabbi Yechanan is saying, milsei amra, to sum up his words, ikra b'kois. Now, why is it important to know if ikra b'kois? Let me tell you very clear. Two ways. What happens if a person said it in Shemona Esrei? Do they have to repeat it ala kois? If ikara bakois, then you have to say it ala kois. More than that, if for whatever reason, someone, according to Rabbi Yechanan, someone made Havdalah ala kois prior to davening Shemona Esrei, they don't have to say it in Shemona Esrei. That's what the Gemara means. Milsa Amra. No, the ikr is bakois, both ways. If you said it in Shemona Esrei, like we do, you have to say it ala kois. If you said it ala kois prior to Shemona Esrei, you don't add Havdalah Shemona Esrei. All of that is Shittas Rabbi Yechanan. Shita number 2. Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi b'shem Rabbi Yitzchak Ruba. He says like this, that Amra bakois, that even though you said it bakois, and according to Rabbi Yechanan, you don't have to repeat it. No. Oimra batfila. You have to say it again in Shemona Esrei. Why? Why? Because he holds the opposite of Rabbi Yechanan, that the Ikir Havdalah is in Shemona Esrei. How will he answer? How did we forget? You have a good kasha. Like I said, many other things you have a kasha. All of the machlokes that we have. No, the Ikir is to say it according to him in the Shemona Esrei. Why do we say it ala kois? Because young kinderlach, they don't have a Shemona Esrei yet. We want for them to know that there is Havdalah b'shvil l'zakois esas tinoikis, which is really great.
Why doesn't he mention women? Now
that we said according to Rabbi Yaakov, the Ikir is the Shemona Esrei. And if you said it in if you made Havdalah on a cup prior to Shemona Esrei, you have to say it in the Shemona Esrei because Ikara is Batfila. So why do you have to make it alakois? That did not hear it in Tefillah. When kids are very young, they're not davening Shemona Esrei. Your b'nei bayis, meaning your wife, doesn't daven maidiv. So for her to hear Havdalah, you make it alakois. The Hilkach, and therefore coming back, I'm reading the Pnei Moshe, opposite of Rabbi Yechanan. He holds that if you said it ala kois, you have to repeat it. Not like Rabbi Yechanan. And now there's a third opinion. So that's the machlokes. And look at the words of the Gemara. Now the Gemara says, Milsa Amra, to sum it up, that Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi b'shem Rabbi Yitzchak Ruba holds ikara batfila. Not ikara batfila. And now the third view. And by the way, the third view is we pascha like the third view. No, don't. The third view is you have to do it both, no matter which way direction. But Rab Ze'eda, in the name of Rav Yehuda b'shem Shmuel, both ways. Amra bakos, amra batfila, amra batfila, amra bakois. Milsei amra, to sum it all up. She ikara kan v'kan. Don't make ikir and tafel. You have to do it twice. Now, I'm just saying that according to the conclusion, Usai, according to the way we pass it, B'Shem Shmuel and Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi, the kasha stands. So it's if ikara batfila or ikara kan v'kan, that means we never stop taking it out of the tefillah. So we have to say that from the beginning you had these differences of opinions, which is difficult. But that must be that way. Because how would you forget it? Only Rabbi Yechanan Shita that holds that ikara bakois, and there was a time like we read from the Rashadili or from the Bavli that during the bulk of the Zman Bayesheni, we never made Havdalah b'tefillah. Ezra said you can do it, and therefore we went back to doing it when we became impoverished. But if a few hundred years you stop practicing something, then taka, you can forget. Fascinating Gemara. We have something similar by in the Babli that when the Gemara says then the Gemara says, I think it was Shimon Shizuri in Brachas, right? Made the Shemona Esrei. So the Gemara asks, hold on, didn't the Anshe Knesset Agdoilo do it? So the Gemara answers, yeah, but since Bisman Ba'Yesheni, the Oilam was not Mechuyev to daven the way we're Mechayev to daven today because there was the real Karbonos, so a few hundred years, you're not Mechuyev to do, you can forget the exact Nusach. He reminded us what the Nusach was. Yeah, what do you say?
According to
no, you need both. You dafka need both. That's something else. So the Vital is just saying something else. Yeah, that until when can you make Abdullah? Until Tuesday. Yeah. All right. Moving on. The next shita, the way our Gerus is Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says that you add Havdalah in Hoida'a, which is in Moedim, which will be more exactly where we at today, the Alanis. Zok the Gemara. Rabbi Yechanan b'shem Rabbi. Rabbi Yechanan says in the name of Rabbi. Matin ke Rabbi Eliezer. Now this is something that we were clear. There's something called halacha ke or matin. Matin means we are inclined to say like Rabbi Eliezer. The focus is whether the words halacha was used or whether the words matin was used. The Charedim reminds us, he's quoting Rashi from Bavli. Look inside the Charedim, the first narrow line on top, 5 lines from the top of the Amid. Matin. What do you mean matin? So he says, I didn't finish reading it, but let's just go to the words matin. Perush Rashi, that whoever says the word halacha, when the Gemara says the halacha is like so and so, halacha means that you darshan so b'pirka. Pirka means in public. When they gathered Shabbos, you say this is the halacha. Whoever the word matin means, midrash loy darshanim b'rabim, something that you don't say in public, but if someone comes to ask you in private, I didn't say yet what he said, but just to remember that nuance over here. So this is what Rabbi Yechanan says in the name of Rabbi, that we are matin like Rabbi Eliezer when the Yom Tov Shechaliyos b'Matzoi Shabbos, whether you are going to the words miyad or whether you're not. So what are we talking about over here on what happens? First of all, Matzoi Shabbos going into Yom Tov. The rule is, if Friday goes into Shabbos, if Yom Tov goes into Shabbos, since you're going mikidusha kala, likidusha chamura, even though Yom Tov and Shabbos are not the same, but you're going up, we don't make Havdalah. Matzah Yom Tov, we make Havdalah. When Yom Tov is Friday Shabbos, we don't make Havdalah Friday night for Yom Tov because you're going up. But whenever Yom Tov is on Sunday, then we make Havdalah Sayin the Davenet Atoy Diyenu, and we make Havdalah Lakois. We make it part of Kiddush. Now let's go like this. What we're really saying is that Havdalah should be said in Chonin Hados. But there's a problem that when you go from Shabbos to Yom Tov, we do not say Chonin Hados in the Shemona Esrei. We have the first 3, we have the last 3, and then we have Kedushas Yom Tov. Now, we taka put it in there, but what the Gemara is really saying is really we paskin like the Chacham. You say it in Chonin Hados. Elamah, what should you do? Matzah Shabbos going into Yom Tov. There's no Chonin Hadas. So Matin, they weren't. If someone would ask you that question, tell them to do it in Hoida'ah. However, Rabbi Yitzchak Ruba in the same Rebbe has another version. No, not only Matin. That Rebbe said that you should say in public, Halacha Rabbi Eliezer, the Yom Tov Shchaliyas v'Matzoi Shabbos. And now the third opinion, Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Nachman b'Shem Rechim Meganiel. No, I'll tell you better. Halacha ki Rabbi Eliezer lo'olam. You say it in Oidah. And furthermore, not only now, guys, Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel is a Tana. It's much better to quote a name of a Tana. Rabbi Bohu quotes Rabbi Elazar as an Amoira. I know there was a Tana, but that's how it works. Rabbi Bohu, in the name of Rabbi Elazar the Amoira, also says Halacha ki Rabbi Eliezer lo'olam. Now let me ask you, which statement is better? What is he adding? If someone quoted a Tana, it's much more powerful. So the Gemara wants to clarify that Rabbi Bohu wasn't separate from Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Nachman. He's not just quoting in the name of Rabbi Elazar da Amoira. If not, the Gemara wouldn't have even put it in over here. We need something more powerful. We're quoting already Rab Chanina ben Gamliel. So the Gemara clarifies that Amar Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha, these Gemara like you don't have in the Bavli. He's explaining to you what he's writing over here. And again, there's so many different gersois. Let's just read. Lav inun tarte shomoyin. Don't learn that Rabbi Yitzchak bar Nachman made one statement and Ababo made another statement. I know they're saying the same thing, but it wasn't two separate statements. No. Ella, Rabbi Yitzchak bar Nachman, which was an Amoira, and Rabbi Elazar. How do we know what Rabbi Elazar says? Because Rabbi Bo said. And Rabbi Elazar, it's two Amoirayim, both Karvayim, B'Shem, Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel, Halacha, ki Rabbi Eliezer, La'olam. Okay. Now, not everyone agrees with Rabbi Eliezer. And even though we just quoted many opinions that say halacha ki Rabbi Eliezer, actually we don't paskin like Rabbi Eliezer. So says the Gemara that the havdalah b'choinin hadas, divrei chachamim. And you know what? We just had this last week, guys. What did we learn last week? We learned last week what happens when you daven Shemona Esrei. People daven it by heart, and it's Shabbos or Yom Tov, and by automatic they said Atochayin Lodom Das Hashivein. So we learned the machlokes, if you remember, whether you stop choitech or whether you go on. And then the Gemara says everyone holds that choinen hadas, if you finish that brach, because really Rabbi holds that you always have to say choinen hadas, even on Shabbos and on Yom Tov, because if you don't have das, how do you have tefillah? We're gonna have this repetition over here. So now we're learning Vavdallah is b'choinen hadas. Divrei chachamim. Always. And Rabbi Kiva Omer, says the Gemara, Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha, the name of Shmuel. Oimra bracha revi is. You say it as a bracha revi is. So here we have all these different dishes. We have the Chachamim, and then we have a big machlokes whether we pass it like Rabbi Eliezer. Here we have the name of Shmuel, guys, that we pass it like Rabbi Akiva, which is quite amazing.
Nobody's talking about Vatoidienu.
No one mentioned Vatoidienu. Clear. Yeah. Yo. Where do we have this? We have this over here. In other words, just the guys, the words "V'havdalah b'choin hadas" that says the Charedim, that's a brayso. Okay. Now, see what's amazing. The Gemara doesn't even have to say halacha kechachamim because we always paskin like that chacham. Now the Gemara is saying, so we had different members that paskin like Rabbi Eliezer. Then we have halacha ki Rabbi Akiva, and now b'shitas chachamim. Let's ask a kasha, which is Amar Rabbi Yudan. Oimer matbeya bracha va'achar kach mavdil. Oh, what does that mean? So look inside the Charedim, guys. It's 12 lines from the bottom. Amar Rabbi Yudan, Amar matbeya bracha. Who is Rabbi Yudan referring to? Not like Rabbi Eliezer, not like Rabbi Akiva. It's like a given. Arabanan koi, says the Charedim. The Amru b'masnisin v'havdalah b'choinin hadas. Now the question is umefaresh. Now, how do you begin that bracha? The yaschil, you should begin with the words ato choinin lo adam das. V'achar kach omer, and then we say, look what we say. We tell God ato amarta. You God told us lahavdo. And then you say ato choinin anton. But where do you say it? You say the whole Ata Choinen prior to you concluding Baruch Ata Hashem Choinen Adas. At the end, you say Havdalah. That's not the way we do it in the middle. That's Shita number one. Now the Gemara said, and Vasya Kerebi, which means Va'asya. We skip these letters. And Rabbi Yudin is following Rabbi. The Rabbi Yomer, Eich bitlu choinen hados b'Shabbos. Huh? Tamayani, I'm amazed. Because they are at Filaminayin. And based on that logic, the Kor says Rabbi Yudin, Im ein deya havdalah minayin. In other words, the koyach of being mavdil comes from bina of pi chasidus, comes from the moyach in particular, but generally from atochen l'am das. So hold on. So how can you say havdalah without beginning atochen l'adam das? Now that you daven for das and the chanami l'rabbanon, you have to say it inside that bracha. I get it. But you have to first say, until the end, you got to say the whole thing. That is opinion number one. Aber Omar Rabbi Yitzchak and Rabbi Eliezer, the opposite direction. Even, again, inside the Chachamim, what do you have to do? That Mavdil, no. Baruch Ato Hashem or Hakel HaKodesh. Let's go with the words of the Charedim. You can say, Ato Amarta Lahavdil is Ato Chen Antonu. And after you say the words of Havdalah, then begin Atochaynu L'Adam Das. It's not a bracha b'fnei atzmai. The question is, where do you put it in? Do you put it at the end or in the beginning? Mavdil, v'achar kach omer madbei bracha. Why is that? Why is that? Look inside the Charedim. It gives Gavali. He says, Upalakad Rabbi Yudin, and V'tamim Parash L'Kamei, which is the halacha, we paskin, she'ein l'tvoy tzarachav ad sheyavdil. One is not allowed to ask for his personal things, that we don't ask on Shabbos for personal things until you make Havdalah. And he says, Das is a personal request. You need Das, I need Das. So how can you even say the words Atochen L'Adam Das if you didn't first make Havdalah? Says the Gra on this Shita, he says Gavaldik. He says that's why, if you think about it, Atochen L'Adam Das, Olam L'Eshbina is not a bakash. Think about the words. In other words, we don't paskin like Rabbi Yitzchak and Rabbi Eliezer. We don't paskin like Rabbi Yudah. Just know, we say it in the middle. We say Ato Choynu L'Adam Das, V'lam L'Eshbina, Ato Chen Antonu. Then V'choneinu Meitcho. But he says a good word. He says that in the beginning of Ato Choynu, you're not asking of God. You are affirming. You're saying a fact. It's almost like a shvach that you, the Oibishter, you're Choynu L'Adam Das. Where is the bakasha? When you say perfect, but Rabbi Yitzchak and Rabbi Eliezer doesn't subscribe to that. He holds that we consider the whole Atochainen from there until the end of Shemir Tfilas personal tzarachav. So you have to first say Havdalah and then you say Atochainen. That's going to be continued.
Thank you, Rabbi.
All right, the computer didn't fall. Everything is good.
How come nobody's talking about the Todienu?
Because you see, not yet. Maybe in the next daf. I didn't learn the next daf yet. Don't forget Vatoidiyenu. I'll tell you the problem with Vatoidiyenu because in Ein Das, Ein Havdalah. Can't be mavdal without Das. Saying the way we learned today, the Gemara is that the Braisa is adding over the Mishnah that when you say L'chachamim, Havdalah, V'choinen Hadas, even on Motzei Shabbos going into Yontif, they would say Atochoinen L'Adam Das. And Rabbi says, I wonder. The Rabbi says, yeah, of course you say Das. Every tefillah has Das.